and welcome to Brewing Brilliance, a podcast where we talk to academics from across the university who are involved with the Healthy Ageing and Chronic Conditions Research Institute. We will be speaking to researchers who are leading innovative interdisciplinary approaches to promote lifelong health, delivering improved interventions to manage chronic conditions more efficiently. These sessions are essentially opportunities for us within the Healthy Ageing and Chronic Conditions Research Institute to meet colleagues from across and beyond our faculty to foster knowledge sharing, collaboration and networking. My name is Adrienne Cleverly, and today we are joined by Dr. Denise Hill and Phil Jones. Denise is an Associate Professor of Applied Sports Psychology at Swansea University, a BPS Chartered Psychologist and a HCPC Registered Practitioner Psychologist. She is also a Fellow of the British Association of Sport and Exercise Sciences. She has taught applied sport and exercise psychology across both undergraduate and postgraduate programmes for over 20 years and supervised numerous PhDs in this subject area to completion. More recently, she has started to apply her expertise outside sport, and that includes the business, health and the care sectors. Phil is a former Royal Marine Commando with a passion for fitness and well-being. Whilst in the Marines, he served all around the world on conflict operations. Upon leaving, he entered the world of close protection, where he was often employed as a personal trainer, life coach to his clients, helping them to get physically and mentally strong. Whilst transitioning from the military, he set up SoFit, which is designed to help people achieve their goals and push themselves to new optimum levels, as well as being a mental health practitioner. He also holds a degree in teaching and is about to have a book published telling his story, which kind of leads us into the idea behind today's topic. So first of all, welcome and thank you both for joining us.
Hello.
Hello.
Phil, would it be okay if I came to you first? And can I ask you to tell us what cold water therapy is and how the idea came about?
Oh, good question. So, in a nutshell, it is placing yourself in cold water at a certain temperature and really overcoming that fight or flight feeling and helping your central nervous system take control. And it does all sorts of wonderful things with your hormones, releasing certain hormones which make you feel better, make you feel more resilient. And it is just a natural drug for me.
A natural drug. You said a certain temperature. What sort of temperatures do you look at?
So that's something the research is what we're looking at. But we do know that cold water immersion or cold water shock on the human body starts at 15 degrees Celsius. So what I find personally, the more I've done it, the more resilient I am to the higher temperatures. But if you're just starting out, start at sort of 15 degrees Celsius and build up your resilience from there. So
the science behind that then.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, I like that. You bring it in. What does it actually mean in real time? So you talked a little bit about how it sort of, with your shock system. Can you tell us like how you feel when you're in that moment?
These would probably be the best place to talk about that.
What's your question?
Okay. All right. What was the question again?
Tell me about it in real time, what it actually feels, or how you actually feel when you're in the water.
Okay, so, I mean, I'll be honest. I hate getting into the water, but I know the benefits and I know how I'm going to feel after it. So for me, while I'm in the water, it creates a natural mindfulness. It's just me in the water, nothing else exists. So I'm really in the present. So all those stresses that you have in the outside world, family stresses, work stresses, those emails that you know are waiting for, all of that kind of fades away while I'm in the water. And it really creates a lot of focus. Upon coming out of the water, I do get a sense of euphoria. And that again is down to certain hormones being released, dopamine and things like that. So that's the sort of love hormone where you just kind of love things a bit better, and everything seems just to be amazing. So I get that sense.
Almost two extremes from getting in and getting out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Hate to love. All in the space of 1 minute.
Yeah, that is right. Yeah.
So can you tell us a bit about the research, what it is you're actually looking at?
Okay, yes. So the study that we're leading at the moment is actually looking at the impact of cold water immersion therapy on PTSD symptomology amongst military veterans. So that's specifically what we're looking at. So, we're in Swansea. So every day you just have to go to the beach and see there's a lot of people who get in the water and are preaching the same way as Phil is about the way that it makes them feel. But actually the empirical literature, the research has not really kept up. So it may be surprising to hear that there isn't a lot of evidence that demonstrates that cold water immersion is having an impact on our mental health. That's catching up. So there's some good work going on around the UK and the world at the moment about the impact of cold water immersion on depression and generalized anxiety. And that's, shown some good signs. But what is remarkable, I think, is that there's no study to date that has looked specifically on PTSD and whether the cold water immersion can actually alleviate any of those symptomologies. And it is remarkable because, 1 in 8 UK veterans get diagnosed with PTSD every year, and that's probably an underestimation. So we're looking at a lot of people in the UK who are experiencing PTSD, or have been diagnosed with PTSD, experiencing the symptomology. And that comes at an enormous personal, social, economic cost at times. So if cold water immersion can alleviate symptomology, then we really should be trying to explore this and understand it. And that's what we're doing. This is the first step of hopefully many to see whether we can demonstrate the impact of cold water therapy on PTSD symptomology across populations, but we're focusing at the moment because of the Swansea University relationship with the veterans. We're focusing specifically on military at this moment in time.
So you mentioned a bit about some of the psychological impact in terms of like depression and things like that. With PTSD, is it the same? Does it differ, or do we not know yet? Is that what we're trying to say?
It has similarities with depression, so we would anticipate that cold water immersion will help. We anticipate and hypothesize that it will help some aspects of PTSD. And a good 50% of individuals who've been diagnosed with PTSD are also co-diagnosed with depression. So with the literature and the evidence out there regarding its impact on depression, we would anticipate, and we are anticipating, that those diagnosed who are in our study or who are experiencing PTSD will gain some benefits. We hypothesize that. But there is key differences between PTSD and depression. And so at the end of the day, we just simply don't know. We don't know at this moment in time whether cold water immersion is something that can help those diagnosed with this condition.
So talking about the cold water immersion, and you mentioned being in Swansea. So the study at the moment, that's taking place in the sea?
It is.
And how does that differ then from other types of cold water immersion? Or you laughed then.
Cold is cold. I mean, from a personal point of view, there's 3 or probably 4 ways to facilitate cold water immersion. There's a cold shower, there's a immersion tank, there's the river, there's the sea. For me, and working with other veterans, I prefer the river. One, it's colder, but also it gives a sort of sense of calming. Second to that is a cold tank, because again, it's your own sort of personal session. What I find with the sea, it's more of, because you've got other factors, you've got the waves and currents and things like that. It's more challenging. So I think that creates, or potentially can create, a different outcome.
And you mentioned you prefer the river. When you go, do you go on your own or do you go as a group?
Yeah, I normally go on my own in the river, and then I'll meet up with other veterans and other people. I've had, since I started, dozens and dozens of people asking to come with me and sort of show them the ways and keep them safe. But yeah, for me, it's just a personal opinion. The river for me is just more connecting.
Because there has been research, hasn't there, on like those environments, and the environmental factors can have a positive effect too. Is that something you've seen, or are you exploring that as well?
Yeah, there is evidence out there regarding, blue space, really, green space therapy, etc. And it needs to be explored further, particularly when we're talking about cold water, because there is clearly individual preferences. But while putting PTSD aside, because there simply is no data at the moment, apart from the stuff that we're collecting. Putting that aside, there is, evidence that social support, being in a group, so whether that's in the river or in the sea, that group activity, that support from others is very much a buffering effect for your mental health, and it's very beneficial. Others, I'm sure, would appreciate the mindfulness element of being on your own, one with nature, etc. So there's a lot to unravel here. So whether it is a physiological response to the cold and or a psychophysiological response to being with others and having the social support, or whether it's a mindfulness aspect, this is to be uncovered, really. It's just to be embraced, really. I mean, obviously people have their own relationship with the outdoors that is to be exploited in the way that suits them. But in terms of the empirical evidence, there's just a lot more to be done to be able to understand the various mechanisms of why people appear to be benefiting from immersing in cold water.
You touched a little bit there on the lack of evidence. Is that partly why this is such a good area to start exploring?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm sure many people will be staggered, as I said before, about the lack of strong, robust empirical evidence supporting or explaining the impact of cold water immersion on human beings, particularly their mental health. So the study that we're leading is the first in the world on whether cold water immersion can impact PTSD symptomology, which I said is an absolute staggering lack of research in the area. In the other areas of mental health, depression and anxiety, it's a little bit more advanced. But we still don't necessarily, we have hypotheses as to why it can be impactful, but there's still a lack of certainty regarding the mechanisms and the processes and how to do it, how to immerse effectively or most effectively to have those beneficial outcomes that we often talk about anecdotally with our friends when we're on the beach or when we're in the sea or not.
So on that note then, a personal question, but how long have you been doing?
I've been participating probably 5 years. So just before COVID started.
So you've got real life experiences of the benefits. Would you say they are long-term benefits?
I think so, yeah. When I have a period that I've not been in the water, I've noticed, especially with the study, it's made me much more aware of my physical well-being, my mental well-being. I definitely have seen a drop off. So it's almost like relating it to maybe the fitness industry, where if you stop doing those fitness classes or runs, then your physical health and even your mental health starts to deteriorate. So where I've had periods, whether it's just unable to do it, or I've been on holiday and there's no cold water, etc., I've definitely noticed a degrade in my mental health.
And have you tried all versions of immersion?
Every week, yeah.
So would you, yeah. I know you've said you prefer, but if you were to go on holiday, would you perhaps? Yeah,
absolutely. Last year, they had sort of cold showers, sort of dunk tanks, and yes, I still partaked in it. It was fantastic. I normally will probably do all three in a week, just because of how my life is. Obviously, meeting up with people. When I've got my two boys, I can't exactly just nip down to the river. So I'm in the tank. They love it. They come and splash me. So it's a bit of a family thing now. So, and that's another thing why I love it. It's the time that you need to invest in it is actually quite little.
That was one of my next questions. Oh. So sorry, carry on.
So, and like I said earlier, we have all these outside stressors and factors, and for me, getting up in the morning and I'm getting hit with a teddy with one child, another child trying to make his breakfast, and he's tip porridge all over the place or milk everywhere. I've got the animals to feed, and I'm like, oh my God, I haven't even started the school run yet. So I've put into my routine that kind of while all of that is sort of going on, or before it's going on, I get into the water. And it just brings an absolute calming reaction to me, and I can deal with all those micro stresses without flipping my lid. I'm far away from that fight or flight where I'd lose my temper, or, you know, I'd go get angry at someone cutting me up or stealing a parking space outside the school. So that's one of the reasons why I absolutely love it. For instance, when the weather's like it is today, nice and sunny, you'll find me in the river. I'll make that extra time and get in the river.
And with that then, is there some safety elements that people need to be aware of with cold water?
Yeah, absolutely, loads. Is the honest answer. And, you know, unfortunately, there's a lot of influencers and people out there that, you know, are not following the science and not doing things, you know, sort of correctly to what we know of. So, I mean, my advice, if you're thinking about doing it or you're just starting, you know, make sure you do go with someone. From my background with the military and the Marines, I was a landing craft coxswain, so I worked on the rivers and waterways and beach landings and things. So I've got a vast knowledge of how bodies of water react. So, but if you haven't got that knowledge, reach out to someone that has. But also, like I say, the beauty about this, you don't have to use rivers or seas and things like that. And we're lucky we're on the coast. We're 10% of the coastline. You know, invest in a small tank and it's fine. And my advice is really start at the higher end, the 15 degrees. It's a really good time of year now because we're coming into summer. So start higher and just do a couple of minutes, see how your body reacts. And, you know, if you're feeling confident and mentally strong enough, then maybe start reducing that temperature. But there's no need. I mean, when I first started, I had that marine mentality of, right, I'm going to do an extra 5 minutes today and I'm going to be colder. And in the end, the positive effects were getting outweighed by the negative effects. I was coming out with the water. I was shivering. It was taking me hours to warm up. My core temperature had lowered to a point where I was no longer thinking, oh, this is actually good for me. So, and that's hopefully, as the research develops, we will find the sweet spot and, you know, for different areas of mental health and physical health. But for me, the underlying advice is stay safe, is go with someone, do it with someone, and don't start too cold.
Or too long.
Yeah.
Or too long, yeah. That's also another point. If you're coming out like a lobster, you've probably been in there a bit too long.
So is that the key, is it?
All jokes aside, it probably isn't the factor, but yeah, cause sometimes you'll get red skin. That's just the blood going to the surface after a minute.
Yeah.
But yeah, just go on the side of caution.
Can I just add to that? Because I mean, we joke, but it is such an important thing because you know, it seems to be a trend at the moment for individuals to be doing a lot of this. There's individuals who are offering cold water and contrast therapy, etc. Well, the evidence behind all of this is very, very equivocal and dubious, to say the least. Okay, so we just need to be really mindful here about what we're doing to ourselves and just being sure that we are very clear on how to do this safely. You know, in terms of this as Phil said, in terms of the cold water response, which is what we want to have, those hormonal releases and this sense of mastery and everything. As I said, it happens at 15 degrees. You know, you can go lower once you've got some used to that and tolerating that, but you are actually just simply damaging your skin and causing harm if you go into very, very cold water. There is no need to do that, number one, to get the benefits. But number two, you are potentially damaging yourself. And then too often we're seeing individuals just diving into the water, particularly in sea, and going underneath the water when it's cold. Now, when you're having a cold water response and you are underwater and so you're holding your breath, I won't bore you with the complicated details, but ultimately, even in healthy individuals, that can cause arrhythmias. And so, you know, there's a very good chance of having episodes if we don't manage and treat cold water as what it should be, which is, you know, a relatively dangerous activity that needs to be respected. And so, yeah, I have to be honest, I'm really, really concerned about the growth of organisations and individuals who are offering cold water immersion, cold water therapy,
Absolutely.
contrast tasks, when they're really not in a position to do so. They're not really educated or qualified to offer that in a safe environment like we do in our studies. Obviously, all of the, health screening, etc., that's required goes into it. As Phil does in his work, all those safety applications are so important that I think people overlook or maybe not aware of.
But the health benefits that you get after doing so if all done properly.
If done properly, if done safely.
Game changing.
It appears anecdotally to be a win-win. Empirically, we'll let you know.
To be considered.
You've got to spoil it with the science of me.
But in terms of the study, you're going to ask me about the study, aren't you?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, would you like to tell us about the study?
Well, I've told you about the study. You can ask me about the findings, and sorry, we'll have to edit that. Sorry.
So, would you like to tell us about the findings to date?
Yeah. So, in terms of, it's the first step. But it's a really important first step. It's a small sample, so obviously any conclusions have to be super tentative. But while there's variation, the trends are really, really pleasing. So generally speaking, those who have regularly immersed in cold water, and this is in the sea, in Swansea, those who've regularly dipped have had a downward trend with their PTSD symptomology and depression and increases in well-being. And what's interesting, those who have dipped most frequently have had the most positive impact. So whilst this is very tentative conclusions, it's exactly what we want to see. So then we can now go on to the next stage and obviously have funding to go on to a feasibility and clinical trial to just demonstrate, the efficacy of cold water immersion therapy on the supplementary treatment of PTSD symptomology.
And the frequency within the study, is that similar to what Phil's doing, or is it different? How often are they getting in?
It varies, but it seems to be that the more the merrier.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So far, but as I say, we can't reach super, robust conclusions with such a small sample. It's just the first stage, but the patterns and the trends are very, very positive in that regard in terms of if they immerse in cold water, their symptomology generally eased. And those who did so most days eased slightly more. But that, as I say, that's just in our sample. So we've just got to be really careful with how we communicate that message because it's very, very tentative, very small sample, lots of variations. But it is absolutely what we want because it's our first step to demonstrate that there's some potential here. And we are then good to go. We have the green light to go on to the next stage. It's our feasibility study for bigger numbers, more control. And we can then start to answer those questions about frequency and temperature and symptomology and whether certain aspects of the PTSD were helped or alleviated more than others. And then obviously provide some explanations as to why.
It all sounds so interesting. Well, when you've got further and you've got more answers, you can come back and tell us some more about it.
I'll have less hair than I've got already.
I'll have more grey hair.
But still in favour of cold water immersion.
Absolutely.
Horses for courses.
Thank you so much both for joining us. If you have enjoyed hearing about this research, you can visit Denise on her staff pages at Swansea University, or you can reach out to Phil at SoFit.
Absolutely.
Or you can get in touch with us at the Healthy Aging and Chronic Conditions Research Institute at Swansea University. Thank you so much, and thanks once again for joining us.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.